My daughter slipped me a note under the dinner table before anyone took the first bite. When I opened it, it said, "Dad, don't drink the iced tea." My daughter-in-law was still holding the pitcher. My son was asking for the salt. The roast chicken was steaming between us. The windows glowed warm against the dark, the way a safe house looks to strangers passing by. And in that moment, I knew something inside my home had learned how to smile. By 4:30 that Sunday afternoon, my house looked the way I had trained it to look every week since my wife died. The dining room table was set with the good placemats Eleanor bought at a church auction 15 years earlier. The napkins were folded the way she always folded them, once in half, then once again clean and square. Her old glass pitcher stood in the middle of the table, catching the late light from the west window. I had brewed the tea that morning and let it cool the way she used to, with lemon slices wrapped in wax paper in the refrigerator so they would not curl at the edges. The silver was polished, the sideboard was dusted, the hall runner was straight, the china cabinet glass had no fingerprints on it. There is a kind of grief that makes a person loud. Mine made me orderly. After Eleanor died, I learned routine can turn into religion if a man needs one badly enough. If I changed the kitchen towels every Thursday, if I mowed the yard on Saturday, if I kept Sunday dinner going, no matter what, then I did not have to ask harder questions. I did not have to ask whether I was holding on to a family or only preserving the outline of one. I could call it dignity. I could call it love. I could tell myself that if my son and daughter still came to the house once a week and sat at the same table their mother had fed them at, then the house had not lost her all the way. That was the lie grief let me live inside, because it was gentler than the truth. I heard Claire's car in the driveway just after 5. She came in without calling Dad, and that should have warned me more than it did. Claire had grown quieter after her mother died, and quieter still after her own marriage came apart. But she was never silent in my house, not until that Sunday. She stepped through the front door, closed it carefully behind her, and stood there one beat too long with one hand still on the knob. 36 years old. Her mother's eyes, her mother's mouth when she was forcing calm over fear. She looked tired, but not in the ordinary way adults come home tired from work and bills and divorce lawyers. She looked like someone who had not been sleeping because sleep required trust. "You're early," I said. She made a small attempt at a smile and leaned in to kiss my cheek. Traffic was lighter than I thought. Her cheek was cool. Her fingers brushed my arm and felt colder than the weather. From the kitchen, Dana called bright as a spoon, striking glass. Tom did. "Claire, bring the rolls." "I brought them," Claire answered, still looking at me instead of toward the kitchen. "I left them in the car." "I'll get them." "No." The word came out too fast, too sharp. She softened right away. "No, I've got it." Then she turned and went back outside before I could answer. I stood in the front hall listening to the sounds from the kitchen. A cabinet door, silverware shifting, ice against glass. Dana humming under her breath. She had always moved through rooms like a person who believed inefficiency was a character flaw. Nothing wasted, nothing out of place. When Eleanor was sick, that had seemed like a blessing. Dana made lists. She tracked appointments. She remembered refill dates. She handled the paperwork none of us wanted to look at. She stepped in before anyone asked, and did it all with the brisk composure of a woman who preferred usefulness to warmth. The first year after Eleanor died, I was grateful. Then gratitude became habit. Then habit began to feel like dependency. Then dependency and little private moments I never let myself examine too long began to feel like occupation. Dana had married my son 11 years earlier. Before Eleanor got sick, I would have described her the way a lot of men describe the women who keep complicated families from coming apart at Christmas: organized, capable, a little severe, but dependable. The kind of woman who remembered birthdays, sent thank-you notes, and kept a leather planner with color-coded tabs like she was running a law office instead of a household. Eleanor used to laugh and say Dana was the only person under 60 who still believed in a filing system. After Eleanor died, Dana kept stepping in. At first it looked like kindness. Then it looked like momentum. Somewhere along the way, without any one dramatic moment to mark it, it began to look like ownership. I had noticed pieces of that, and done what men like me do when truth arrives in a form too intimate to accuse directly. I named each piece something smaller: stress, family strain, strong personality, a practical woman in a house built by a softer one. Claire came back in with the rolls and went straight to the kitchen. I followed slower, drying my hands on a dish towel that did not need drying. Dana was standing at the counter wearing one of Eleanor's aprons. Not one of the stained old ones she wore in the garden or when she was canning tomatoes. The blue striped one she used when company came over. I had seen Dana wear it before, and every time I felt the same quick, mean little twist in my chest I never knew how to justify. She was slicing tomatoes with neat, economical motions, perfectly at ease in a kitchen that had once belonged to another woman's instincts. "There she is," Dana said with a smile. "You look tired, sweetheart." Claire set down the rolls. "Long week." Dana's smile held. "You've had a lot of those lately." It was a harmless sentence if you listened only to the words. Harm almost never arrives dressed like harm. It shows up wearing clothes you already trust. "Everybody all right?" I asked. "Of course," Dinah said before Claire could answer. "I was just telling her she needs to take better care of herself." Claire opened the cabinet for plates she had known the location of since childhood, then closed it without taking any out. That tiny hesitation scraped across me, hard enough to notice and too lightly to name. "I'm fine," she said. Dana turned toward me with that same polished brightness. "Tom, did you take your evening pill yet, or are you waiting until after dinner? Last Sunday you forgot. And then you said it made your stomach act up later." I looked at her. "Did I?" She laughed lightly. "You did. See? That's what I mean." Claire's hand stopped on the cabinet handle. "It's all right," I said. "I'll take it after." "Good," Dana said. Less chance of mixing things up. She said it gently. That was always the part that unsettled me later. She never said anything sharp enough to challenge without making a man sound foolish or proud if he pushed back. Her concern came wrapped so neatly you could spend half the night wondering whether the ugliness you heard in it belonged to her tone or your own shame. Ryan arrived 10 minutes later carrying a bottle of red wine. He knew I would not open on a Sunday because Eleanor always said wine with roast chicken made supper feel like a hotel. He kissed Dana, clapped me on the shoulder, nodded at Claire, and asked if the game had started yet. He was 40 and still moved through my house like a son who assumed it would hold him no matter how carelessly he leaned against the frame. Broad through the shoulders, dark hair starting to gray at the temples, more like me than Claire in the face. But where I had inherited Eleanor's instinct to read a room before speaking in it, Ryan had always had the opposite gift. He could live inside a thing a long time without feeling any need to interpret it. Maybe that was why Dana got as far as she did. By 6 o'clock we were at the table. I sat at the head because Eleanor used to insist I earned that seat if I was the one carving. Ryan sat to my right, Dana beside him, Claire on my left. The late sunlight came in low through the dining room window and turned the tea amber in the pitcher. There is always a moment before a meal begins when a man can still pretend all the people he loves are gathered for the same reason he is. I bowed my head, and the others followed. I thanked God for the food for the house, for the family gathered in it. I even thanked him as I always did for Eleanor's memory, though I had stopped saying her name aloud at the table because in the first year after she died, Claire would cry and Ryan would stare down at his plate like grief had wandered in from the yard and sat down uninvited. When I lifted my head, Claire was looking at her lap. Dana picked up the pitcher. "I'll pour." "That's all right," I said. I've got it." She smiled and did not wait for my answer. She poured Ryan's first, then Claire's, then her own, then mine last. There was a pause just before she set my glass down. Not long, not obvious, only long enough that if I had not been looking right at her hand, I might have missed it. She sat, We passed dishes. Ryan started telling the story about a mistake in one of his office reports. Dana corrected 2 details before he got halfway through it. Claire reached for the butter and then set the knife back down without using it. I carved the chicken. If anyone had walked past the house and looked through the lit dining room window, they would have seen an ordinary American family at supper. A widower hosting his grown children. Roast chicken tea, soft lamplight, no raised voices, no broken glass, no visible danger. That was what made the note feel so cold in my hand when Claire touched my wrist under the table. Not a grab, not a clutch. Just one quick, firm touch, the way Eleanor used to touch me when she wanted me to stop talking and listen. I looked down. A folded square of paper rested near my plate, half hidden by the edge of the tablecloth. For 1 second, my mind offered 3 harmless explanations in a row. Grocery list, reminder, something silly about Ryan or Dana or the game. I opened it beneath the table. Dad, don't drink the iced tea. I read it twice because the sentence seemed too childish for the room it was written in. Not the handwriting. Claire's hand had always been neat and narrow. The sentence itself. It was the kind of warning that belonged in a courtroom or a nightmare or a cheap thriller on television, not at the same table where my wife used to pass green beans and tell Ryan to sit up straight. When I looked up, everyone's face was where it had been before. Ryan was reaching for the beans. Dana was asking if the chicken needed more salt. Claire had picked up her fork and was moving food around her plate without eating it. Nobody in that room should have been able to keep breathing that calmly if the note meant what it appeared to mean. My fingers went cold. I folded the paper once and slipped it into my pants pocket. Dana glanced at me. Her smile changed by half a degree. Tom, you all right? I'm fine. You haven't touched your tea. There it was, small, pleasant, immediate. I looked at the glass in front of me. It may have been imagination. Memory is a treacherous witness once fear gets near it. But at that moment, the tea in my glass looked slightly different from the others. Not darker exactly. Cloudier, maybe. The lemon slice riding nearer the top, a faint ring along the inside as if something had dissolved there and never quite disappeared. I picked it up. Claire's knuckles turned white around her fork. The glass was cold in my hand. Condensation slicked my fingers. I lifted it toward my mouth as if I meant to drink, but stopped short and breathed in. Under the lemon and sugar there was something else. Not strong, not movie poison strong. Something flat and bitter and medicinal, like the smell of a crushed pill buried under sweetness. My stomach tightened so hard it felt like my body knew before my mind admitted it. I set the glass down. Dana watched me do it. "You sure you're okay?" she asked. "You look pale." "I'm fine. You ought to drink something. You've been getting those dizzy spells again." Ryan looked up. "You still getting dizzy?" "Once in a while," I said. Claire said nothing. Dana leaned back, slightly still all concern. "That's what I told him. He forgets to hydrate, then he forgets whether he took his meds. Then he wonders why he feels off." My daughter raised her eyes then, and there was such naked fear in them that I nearly turned to see what she could possibly be looking at behind me. Instead, I heard myself say, "My stomach's a little sour." "I'll wait." Dana's gaze flickered to the glass, then back to my face. "It's just tea." "I know what it is." The room went still for one beat. Not visibly, the kind of stillness you feel first in your throat before it reaches the air. Then Ryan laughed awkwardly and restarted his story. Dana passed the potatoes. Claire put a bite of chicken in her mouth and chewed without tasting it. I cut my food into neat pieces I did not want. The rest of the meal survives in fragments. Dana reaching across me for the salt and the clean, expensive smell of her lotion turning my stomach. Ryan asking if I had called the gutter man yet. Claire dropping her napkin and flinching barely at all when Dana stood to pick it up for her. My own voice answering ordinary questions in the voice of a man who already sounded a little less sure of himself than he had that morning. Mostly, I remember the glass by my plate like an accusation, When supper ended, I stood too fast and had to put one hand on the back of my chair. Dana noticed that too. "See?" she said softly. "Sit down a minute." I said I'm fine. I carried my plate into the kitchen. Dana tried to take it from me. I did not let her. She looked surprised, then smiled again as if I had misunderstood kindness on purpose. Claire lingered in the doorway to the hall while Ryan helped Dana clear the table. Her hand was up at her throat, fingers twisting the chain she wore under her blouse. Eleanor's wedding band hung there. Claire had worn it since the funeral. Some days I noticed it, and some days I could not bear to. I nodded toward the den. She followed me without a word. Once the door was half closed, I turned and took the note from my pocket. "What is this?" Claire looked at the paper, not at me. "Exactly what it says. That's not enough. It has to be enough for right now." "Claire." She pressed her lips together. I could see then that she was trembling. Not enough for somebody glancing in from the hall to notice, but enough that the tendons stood out in her neck above the chain. "Did you see her do something?" I asked. She shook her head once. "Then why would you write this?" "Because I needed you not to drink it." "That is not an answer. It's the only one I can give you tonight." Anger rose in me then, but not clean anger. Fear wearing anger's coat. "You pass me a note at my own table telling me not to touch what's in my glass, and then you won't tell me why?" Her eyes came up to mine. "Because if I say too much too soon and I'm wrong about how much she knows, I lose whatever chance I still have to prove it." The room seemed to tilt under that sentence. I said. Claire closed her eyes for 1 second. "Dad, please." I heard dishes in the kitchen. Dana's laugh low and soft. Ryan saying something I could not make out. The familiar sounds of a Sunday evening in my house. They should have steadied me. Instead, they made me feel like I was standing inside a play everyone else had already rehearsed. "Are you saying Dana put something in my tea? I'm saying don't let her know you suspect anything. That is not the same thing." "No," she said. "It isn't." I stared at her. There are moments in the father's life when his child becomes older in his mind all at once. Not because of years, because of burden. I had seen Claire grieve her mother. I had seen her walk out of a bad marriage with the expression of a woman carrying her own ribs in a box. But I had never seen this particular look on her face before, the look of someone who had been standing alone inside knowledge too dangerous to speak out loud. "How long?" I asked. Her throat moved. "Long enough." My chest hollowed out. "Why didn't you come to me?" She laughed once, and there was no humor in it. I tried. I opened my mouth to deny that, then shut it again. Because memory is a cruel thing once it decides to cooperate. Claire asking me 2 months earlier whether I still filled my own pill organizer. Claire staring too long at the picture one Sunday afternoon. Claire asking Dad, "Do you ever feel strange after dinner?" And me answering, "Honey, I'm 68 years old. I feel strange after tying my shoe." "You need to trust me tonight," she said. "That's all I'm asking. You're asking for more than that." "I know. Do you have proof?" She looked toward the door. "Not enough yet." "Then why tonight?" That shook her. For the first time since she came in, her control slipped. Because she changed something. What I don't know exactly. The glass, maybe. The way she poured it. Something was different. "You don't know." "I know enough." I took 1 step back because suddenly the room felt too small for the amount of not knowing in it. "Dad," she said quietly, "please don't make me say any more in this room." I followed her eyes to the smoke detector on the ceiling, then to the vent above the den doorway, then to the hall beyond. A ridiculous thought. Except it did not feel ridiculous with her standing there. "You think she's listening?" "I think she notices everything." That at least I knew to be true. Ryan called from the kitchen, "Claire, you heading out soon?" She wiped her hands on the sides of her skirt, even though there was nothing on them to wipe. "I need to go." I caught her elbow. "You don't leave me here with this and drive home." She turned back. For 1 second I saw Eleanor in her so sharply it hurt. Then, "Don't be alone with her if you don't have to," she said. "Claire." She looked at me with tears she would not let fall. "I'm trying to get there before it's too late." Then she left the den. I followed slower. By the time I reached the front hall, she had picked up her purse. Dana stood near the dining room archway, drying her hands on a dish towel. "You leaving already?" Dana asked. "Early morning," Claire said. Dana tilted her head. "You barely ate." "Not that hungry. You look pale, too. Maybe whatever Tom has everybody's getting." Claire did not answer. She kissed my cheek again, and when she did, she pressed her fingers once against my arm, as if to say, "Hold." Then she was gone. Ryan and Dana stayed another half hour. He asked whether I wanted him to look at something in the garage next weekend. She rinsed glasses and put leftovers into containers I had not asked her to choose. I stood in the kitchen answering when spoken to, feeling like a man who had walked halfway across a familiar room and found one wall moved 6 inches to the left. At the sink, Dana held up my tea glass with a small smile. "You really should have had more to drink." I looked at the glass in her hand. She looked back at me. "Maybe next week," I said. She set it upside down in the rack. When they finally left the house, settled around me the way it always did. Refrigerator hum. Clock in the front room. Pipes tapping once in the wall. Familiar sounds in a familiar house. If I had gone to bed right then, I might have told myself by morning that the whole thing had been a daughter's nerves feeding an old man's imagination. But once a room shows you its second face, you cannot go back to trusting the first one. I went first into the dining room. The table had been cleared. The pitcher washed and turned upside down on the drain mat, the placemats stacked. Nothing looked wrong. That was the worst part. The room looked respectful, innocent, as if it had meant me no harm at all. I stood where Claire had sat and looked at my own chair. My place setting the center of the table where Eleanor used to keep fresh flowers in spring. Then I heard Dana's voice in my head again. "It's just tea." I went upstairs. My bathroom light always buzzed for a second after I flipped the switch. Eleanor used to say the house made noises like an old man clearing his throat. The medicine cabinet mirror showed me a face I did not much care for at that hour. Gray in the beard, lines deeper around the mouth, eyes tired enough that concern could be draped over them like a blanket by anyone wanting to explain me away. I opened the cabinet. My blood pressure prescription was where it always was. Cholesterol, medicine on the second shelf. Weekly organizer in front. A brown bottle behind it that I did not remember opening yet. I took down the organizer. Sunday evening empty. Monday morning filled. Monday night filled. I frowned and set it on the sink. I lived alone. I filled that organizer every Thursday after breakfast. I had done it that way for years because routine makes mistakes harder to hide from yourself. I knew with the peculiar certainty of men who do ordinary things the same way for a long time that I had not put one of those pale blue tablets into a Tuesday night. Yet there it sat. I reached for the brown bottle behind the organizer and checked the label. Refill date from 8 days earlier. I did not remember picking it up. That alone was not enough. Age does ugly work in small private ways first, but there was something else. The seal under the cap had already been broken, and the bottle felt lighter than it should have if it had only been opened once. I counted, then counted again. My chest tightened. I told myself there had to be a simple explanation. Dana might have picked it up. Ryan might have moved something around. Claire might have scared me badly enough that normal disorder was beginning to look like design. I put the bottle back. Then I took it out again and carried it downstairs. The kitchen was dark except for the light over the stove, which cast a weak yellow half circle across the counter. Eleanor used to leave one lamp on in the breakfast nook because she hated walking into a black kitchen at night. After she died, I left the stove light instead. I do not know what that says about grief except that it changes the shape of your compromises. I opened the drawer by the refrigerator where I kept coupons, dead batteries, takeout menus I never used, and receipts I usually meant to sort. There are people who think suspense arrives with music. In real life, it often arrives with paper. The pharmacy slip was folded once. My name on it. Prescription number matching the bottle in my hand. Pickup date from last Wednesday. I stood there staring at that date. Last Wednesday, I had not gone to the pharmacy. I knew that because Marjorie Keene next door had come over before lunch with zucchini bread and stayed 45 minutes too long talking about the young couple down the street repainting their shutters black. I had not left the house until nearly 3, and when I did, it was only for gas and birdseed. Maybe I had gone Tuesday. Maybe Donna had picked it up and forgotten to mention it. Maybe I had asked her to. Maybe. The trouble with maybe is that it breeds in the dark. I opened the refrigerator and looked at the pitcher on the shelf. Empty now. Clean. Innocent as glass. I shut the door. Then I stood there long enough for a memory to come that I had not invited. It was from the year before Eleanor died. She was still strong enough then to insist on making the tea herself, though standing at the counter tired her more quickly than she admitted. I had come in from the yard with dirt on my boots and found her leaning one hand on the sink, waiting for the kettle to cool, looking not sick exactly, but older than the woman I married. "You ought to sit," I said. "In a minute." I went to her anyway, put my hands around her waist from behind, felt how much less of her there was than there used to be. She covered one of my hands with hers and said very quietly, "Promise me something." What if anything ever feels wrong in this house after I'm gone? Don't explain it away just because explaining it away is easier. I laughed then, not because it was funny, because that is what people do when fear arrives wearing a domestic face and they are not ready to call it fear. What kind of thing would feel wrong? She turned and looked at me in that steady way she had when she thought I was hiding behind good manners. "Tom," she said. "I mean people." I kissed her forehead and said, "You're not going anywhere." The look she gave me was so full of love and disappointment at once that I had to look away. In the kitchen with the receipt in my hand, I shut my eyes. Don't explain it away just because explaining it away is easier. I carried the bottle upstairs, sat on the edge of the bed, and tried to arrange the facts into something smaller than danger. Claire had been frightened before the tea was poured. My glass had looked different. The drink had smelled wrong. Dana had wanted me to drink it. The organizer held pills I did not remember setting out. The bottle had been refilled when I did not remember refilling it. The receipt said it was picked up on a day I knew I had not gone. Still, I was not ready to say it out loud, not even to myself. A man can stand at the edge of a truth and know it by temperature long before he admits what he is looking at. I rose and crossed to the window. From there, I could see the dark outline of the next house and the strip of driveway under the street lamp. My reflection hovered in the glass like somebody I might know but would not trust if he showed up at the door after midnight, claiming to understand the trouble in this house better than I did. The worst thought did not come first. The worst thought came after the others had made room for it. Not that the tea might have been wrong, not that Claire might be right, but that if Claire was right about the tea, then the weakness had not begun tonight. The dizzy spells, the afternoons I had lost whole hours to fatigue and blamed on age. The mornings my head felt packed with damp cotton. The Sundays I had gone to bed before 9 and told myself grief still moved through the body, long after everybody else expected it to become memory. I looked at the bottle in my hand, then at the receipt on the dresser where I had laid it flat under the lamp. For the first time since Eleanor died, my own bedroom did not feel entirely like mine. If Claire was right about the tea, then maybe I had not been getting weaker on my own. Maybe someone had been helping me. I did not sleep enough to call it sleep. I lay on my back in the dark with the receipt on the nightstand and the refill bottle beside it, as if keeping them close might force them to become innocent by morning. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Claire's hand sliding that folded paper under the tablecloth. Every time I opened them, the ceiling above me looked like it belonged to a room I had rented from somebody else. At 2 in the morning, I got up, checked the locks, walked through the kitchen, and stood at the sink with both hands braced against the counter, trying to remember whether I had ever once in my life been afraid in that room. The answer was yes. but only in honest ways. When Eleanor was sick and the oncologist had called on a Tuesday evening while she was making soup. When Claire was 17 and came home an hour late on black ice. When Ryan was 10 and split his head on the mailbox post, and I stood over the sink washing his blood off my hands while Eleanor found the car keys. Those were clean fears. Fears with names. Fears that asked something of you and then eased when you answered. This was something else. This was fear with table manners. I must have drifted off sometime just before dawn, because when I woke it was to the grey wash of morning and the sharp panic of forgetting for half a second. Then I saw the bottle and the receipt, and remembered all at once hard enough to make me sit straight up. The house had that thin, early quiet Eleanor loved. She used to say a home told the truth about itself before 8 in the morning, before traffic started, before phones rang, before people had time to arrange themselves for each other. I dressed, made coffee, and stood with the mug in both hands at the kitchen window. Marjorie Keene next door was already in her front yard, in a cardigan too big for her, clipping dead heads off potted mums with the solemnity of surgery. I almost waved. Then I did not. I had the strange feeling that if I behaved normally on purpose, the purpose would show. I took the organizer down again and set it on the table beside the receipt. In daylight, the irregularity looked smaller, not larger. That is another ugly thing about domestic fear. Morning does not always expose it. Sometimes it only makes you feel foolish for seeing it in the dark. I opened each compartment one by one, counting checking labels, trying to prove myself wrong. By 8:30, I had found 3 separate ways to explain what I was looking at, and none of them satisfied me. I slipped the bottle and the receipt into the inside pocket of my jacket, just as the phone rang. I jumped hard enough to knock coffee against the rim of the mug. It was Ryan. "Morning," he said. "Morning. You sound tired." "I am tired." He hesitated. "Dana said dinner felt weird last night." I leaned one hand on the counter. "Weird how?" She said Claire was in one of her moods and you seemed kind of off. She thought maybe you were coming down with something. There was a moment right there when I could have said it. Could have asked him whether his wife had touched my medications. Could have asked whether he understood what he had just done, carrying her language into my kitchen at 8:30 in the morning, as if it belonged to him now. Instead, I said, "I'm fine." He exhaled, relieved too quickly. Good. Dana was worried. There are times when worry sounds so much like ownership that a man hears the difference too late. "I've got a few things to do today," I said. "I may not be by the phone." "Okay. You need anything?" "Not yet," I nearly said. Instead, no. After I hung up, I stood looking at the dark screen until my own reflection looked back at me. Dana was worried. Dana had a word for everything. She worried. She handled things. She kept track. She noticed. She made sure. Somewhere inside that pile of reasonable verbs, my life had begun to move without me. At 10:15, Claire texted, "Can you meet me somewhere not there, not there?" I read the message 3 times. Then I wrote back, where she named a diner 2 towns over that Eleanor and I used to stop at after church when the children were small and the roast would keep another hour. I had not been there in years. The last time might have been the spring before Eleanor's diagnosis, when she ordered blueberry pancakes and gave me one of those looks across the table that married people use in the middle of ordinary life, when they have just remembered for no reason at all that they got lucky. I wrote noon. Then I spent the next hour walking through my own house like a guest, trying to memorize the layout before nightfall. Nothing had changed. That was the trouble. The hall runner still lay half an inch crooked where Eleanor used to scold me for catching it with my boot. The clock in the front room still ran 2 minutes fast because I had never gotten around to correcting it after the power outage in July. The kitchen towels were folded in the same drawer. The pantry still held canned tomatoes, flour tea boxes, and things bought by habit rather than plan. But the feeling had changed. The kitchen bothered me first. I stood at the counter looking at details I had noticed 100 times and never added together. Spice jars relabeled in Dana's narrow print instead of Eleanor's rounder hand. Supplements arranged in a wire basket beside the bread box where there had once only been a bowl of apples. A clipboard clipped to the side of the refrigerator with a grocery list appointment reminders and my initials written beside 2 dates I did not remember discussing with anyone. Even the dish soap was different, fragrance-free, gentle something Dana had brought in months ago because the lemon one I liked was too harsh. Each change had arrived alone. Alone, each one could be called help. Together they looked like occupation. I opened the pantry and studied the shelves. Tea on the second shelf, honey, crackers, a row of vitamin bottles. A box of herbal sleep packets Ryan had once laughed at, and Dana insisted everybody needed after 50. A canister of lemon drink mix nobody in the house but Dana ever used. None of it was a crime. None of it made me feel like I owned the room. At 11:30 I left. The diner had not changed much. Red vinyl booths, pie case near the register. A bell over the kitchen pass-through. Waitresses who called every man over 60 hon without sounding fake. Claire was already there in the back, sitting where she could see the front door and the parking lot at the same time. That chilled me more than it should have. She had not ordered coffee. Her hands were wrapped around a glass of water she had barely touched. When I slid into the booth across from her, she searched my face first, not with affection, but with inventory. "You came alone," she said. "Yes." She didn't ask where you were going. "No." Claire nodded once, then glanced toward the waitress coming with menus. "We ordered like strangers. Coffee for me. Nothing for her except another water." When the waitress walked away, Claire leaned in so slightly that if you were not watching for fear, you might have called it posture. "I need you to listen all the way through before you decide what this sounds like," she said. "All right. I mean it." I said, "All right." She drew in a breath. "I first noticed something in January. That surprised me, not because it felt too early, but because it turned suspicion into a calendar." "January," I repeated. She nodded. "You came by my apartment to help with the heater. You were fine when you got there. Halfway through you got so dizzy you had to sit down on the floor. I remember that. You said you hadn't eaten enough. I probably hadn't. You'd just come from Sunday dinner." I looked at her. At the time, I didn't think that meant anything she said. It just stayed with me. She reached into her purse and took out a small spiral notebook. Drugstore cheap, bent corners, pages softened by handling. It hurt me to see it, not because of what it was, because my daughter had needed it. "I started writing things down after March," she said. "I wasn't planning to. I just kept having this feeling that details kept sliding around, and I didn't want to be one more person in that house she could make sound confused." She slid the notebook across the table. I opened it. And before I read the first line, I knew I was about to find out how long my daughter had been standing watch over me without my knowing it. The first line in Claire's notebook was dated March 10th. Dana corrected him about meds in front of Ryan. Dad looked embarrassed. The second line was a week later. Tea glass looked darker. Could be the light. Then April. He got sleepy at table before dessert. Didn't feel normal. Donna asked if he'd taken pills, then went upstairs before he answered. Then May. Heard her say to Ryan in kitchen, "He's getting harder to manage when he's proud." I read that one twice. "Did Ryan hear it?" I asked. He was standing there. "What did he say?" "Nothing," she said. Then, after a beat, "Or not enough." She reached into her purse again and took out her phone. There's more. Photos first. My medicine cabinet shelf taken on different dates. Pill bottles lined up one way in one photo, another way in the next. A refill sticker with a date a week earlier than it should have been. The weekly organizer open on my bathroom counter. A kitchen drawer with pharmacy printouts half visible under a stack of coupons. One blurry photo of Dana's hand near my glass, while the table was being set too vague to prove anything and sharp enough to make my teeth ache. "Claire," I said quietly, "why didn't you tell me you were doing this?" She gave a short laugh with no humor in it. "Because I tried telling you what I was seeing in words, and you kept giving me reasons it wasn't what I thought." I opened my mouth and shut it again. She looked down at the notebook. At first, I thought maybe she was just overmanaging, taking over things that weren't hers to take over. But then it stopped feeling like personality. What changed? You did. Her eyes lifted to mine. You started looking at the house like you were waiting for it to tell you what day it was. Heat rose into my face so fast I could feel it in my ears. I'm not saying that to hurt you, she said. It still does. I know. There are humiliations a person can survive if they happen in private. Being seen weakening by your child is not one of them. She lowered her voice even further. Do you remember Memorial Day? Yes, you went upstairs for your jacket and came back down asking where Mom was. I stared at her. I was tired, I said. Claire's eyes filled, but she did not look away. She'd been dead 2 years. I took my hand off the coffee cup because it had started to shake. That happened one time. That happened one time that I heard. And Donna looked at Ryan like she'd been waiting for it. The waitress passed behind us with a tray of plates for another table. Silverware clinked. Somebody laughed near the pie case. The ordinary noise of the diner went on like weather from a different world. Do you think I'm losing my mind? I asked. Claire's face changed at once. Hurt first, then anger at the question itself. No, then, what do you think I think she's been making you question yourself 1 inch at a time? I think she times things. I think she knows how to make concern sound like fact. And I think she's been doing it long enough that the rest of us started adjusting to her version of you. Version, not condition. Version. I looked back down at the notebook. June 2nd. She poured his tea last again. June 2nd. She said, remember your blood pressure before he touched the glass. June 9th. Dad seemed normal until after drink. Slept in chair. July 14th. Ryan told me, you're reading too much into this. Donna's the one keeping things together. He sounded like he was repeating something. Did you ask anyone outside the family? I said. She hesitated. Claire. I talked to somebody once. Who the pharmacist? Not directly. Not with your name. I asked about interactions for a family member, and she said some of what I described could absolutely cause dizziness and confusion. But she couldn't tell me anything concrete without records. I leaned back and looked at the stained ceiling tile above us for a second. The diner smelled like coffee syrup and burned toast. The smell punched through me with a memory I had not asked for Eleanor in this same diner 20 years earlier, cutting Ryan's pancakes into exact squares because he had once decided food tasted better in straight lines. Claire coloring on the paper placemat with the back of a crayon because she liked the pressure marks it left. Eleanor looking up at me with that quick, private smile because both children were talking at once and she loved noise when it came from our table. I had spent 2 years telling myself I was honoring her by keeping Sunday dinner alive. What if I had only kept the room open for somebody else to use? Claire's voice pulled me back. Dad. I lowered my eyes. I need you to come with me to see Dr. Morales. Today she's expecting me at 1:30 if I can bring the family member I asked about. I almost said no, not because I did not want answers, but because some part of me still believed answers might harden something I could survive more easily while it stayed half soft. Claire saw it in my face and leaned in farther. You asked me for proof, and you think she'll give it to me. I think she'll tell us whether this is bad luck, bad memory, or something worse. Something worse. The words hung between us like a door neither of us wanted to be first through. I rubbed a hand over my mouth. All right. For the first time since I sat down, Claire let out a breath like she had been holding all morning. On the drive to the pharmacy, she rode with me, and we hardly spoke. I kept both hands on the wheel and watched familiar roads slide past as if I were being carried toward somebody else's diagnosis. At the light by the old public library, Claire said suddenly, Mom knew before me. I turned my head. What? She was looking straight ahead through the windshield. Not everything, but something. I didn't understand it until later. I waited. The summer before she died, she stopped letting Dana handle her medications. I frowned. No. She said, Dana was busy. Yes. Claire shook her head. That's what she said out loud. The light changed. I drove on. She told me once in the laundry room that being useful and being good weren't always the same thing, Claire said softly. My hands tightened on the wheel. She meant Dana. I didn't know that at the time. I thought she meant some woman from church. Then, after she died, I found Mom had moved some of the pharmacy paperwork out of the kitchen drawer and into her desk. I thought maybe she was just organizing. Now I don't. The road blurred for one dangerous second, then sharpened again. I could hear Eleanor's voice as clearly as if she was sitting in the passenger seat instead of our daughter. Being useful and being good aren't always the same thing. At the time, if she had ever said that in front of me, I had almost certainly nodded the way men nod at general truths. That is one of the easiest ways to miss a warning. Let it sound philosophical. Let it stay broad. Let it float above the room instead of landing on the one person it was about. Dr. Evelyn Morales owned one of those neighborhood pharmacies that survive by becoming part of people's lives instead of trying to beat chain stores on price. She had known Eleanor by name. After the funeral, she sent a card and signed it only Evie, which told me more about her decency than a page of formal sympathy ever could. The bell over the door rang when we stepped in. Cool air, floor cleaner, vitamins, greeting cards. That faint medicinal smell every pharmacy carries, no matter how warmly they decorate the front counter. Claire went rigid the second the door shut behind us. I noticed and hated that I had not noticed enough before. Dr. Morales came out from the back in a white coat with a mechanical pencil clipped near the collar. Dark hair pulled back, sharp eyes, no wasted motion. "Mr. Whittaker," she said. "Claire." Something in her face told me she had already decided this was serious enough not to pretend otherwise. She led us into a consultation room off to the side. Round table, 2 chairs, a monitor on the wall, a tissue box placed where anybody could reach it without having to explain why it was there. I took the bottle and the receipt from my jacket pocket and laid them on the table. My hand looked older doing it. Dr. Morales sat down across from us, but did not touch either item right away. Before I say anything, she said, "I need to ask a few questions. Who manages your medications at home?" "I do." Her eyes moved once toward Claire, then back to me. "Usually?" "Yes." "Has anyone else been picking up refills? I'm beginning to think they may have." She nodded once and tapped the pencil lightly against the table. "Have you experienced dizziness? Unusual fatigue, confusion, or changes in memory around certain times?" I almost said, "I'm 68, of course I have." But that sentence suddenly sounded less like realism than surrender. "Yes," I said. How long I looked at Claire? Longer than I've admitted. Dr. Morales logged into her system. The room went quiet except for the tap of keys. "I can only discuss what is authorized," she said, "but I can review your own refill history with you present." "Do that." She turned the screen enough for me to see the columns and dates. What followed was not dramatic in the way people on television expect revelation to be. No alarms, no gasps, no one stood up and announced the truth. There were dates, refills, overlaps, notes attached to pickups. A pattern so dry and orderly, it made my chest tighten worse with every line. "This medication," she said, pointing with the eraser end of the pencil, "was picked up 11 days early in May. I didn't request that. There is a note that the caregiver said doses had been misplaced." I stared at the line. "Who is listed as caregiver?" Claire asked. Dr. Morales did not answer immediately. "The name attached to the pickup authorization is Dana Whittaker." I looked down at my hands. "There's another concern," she said. This refill overlapped with a sleep aid purchase and an herbal calming supplement. Individually, that doesn't prove wrongdoing. In combination for someone your age with your blood pressure medication, it can absolutely contribute to dizziness, slowed cognition, and disorientation. You're saying, I could have been drugging myself by accident. I'm saying those combinations should not have been happening casually. And they should not have been purchased or administered without your clear understanding. Claire's voice came low and tight. What about the memory stuff? Could that explain the episodes? Dr. Morales folded her hands. It could explain episodes. It does not diagnose anything larger. But it can create the appearance of cognitive decline in ways families sometimes misunderstand. The sentence split my life cleanly in two. Create the appearance. So somebody could make an old man look like he's slipping, I said. Dr. Morales met my eyes. Yes. The word landed without mercy because it was not dressed in comfort. She clicked to another screen. There are also notes from 2 separate pickups in which the person collecting your prescriptions described forgetfulness, missed doses, and trouble keeping track of routine. Those notes matter because they create a history. I heard Claire inhale beside me. Would that go to his doctor? She asked. If the family raised medication concerns, yes, it could become part of a broader clinical picture. Again, I am not accusing anyone of anything I cannot document. But this is not ordinary housekeeping. I sat very still. There had been a story growing around me. Not just symptoms. A story. One in which I was a little more tired each month, a little more confused, a little more in need of somebody useful and organized to keep me from mixing things up. How long have you noticed this? I asked. She chose her answer carefully. I noticed inconsistencies months ago, not enough to act beyond standard caution. I regret not pressing harder when the pattern first began to trouble me. That regret did something strange inside me. It hurt, yes, but it also steadied me. Another adult in the world had seen a shape in this. Another person had looked at the same pieces and not dismissed me as proud old or difficult. Claire asked, Can you print the refill history? Dr. Morales nodded. I can print what belongs to Mr. Whitaker. When the sheets came out, she laid them flat in front of me, one at a time, like cards in a game where the prize was my own mind. Mr. Whitaker, she said quietly, whatever this is, do not confront it without documentation in place. If there is a misunderstanding, evidence protects everyone. If there is not evidence, protects you. When I stood up, my legs did not feel like they quite belonged to me. Claire touched my sleeve. Dad. I'm all right. It was a reflex lie. She knew it. I knew it. Doctor. Morales knew it too, but she let me keep the dignity of saying it. Outside, the sun felt too ordinary. We stood beside my truck in the parking lot, papers in my hand, and for a long moment, neither of us spoke. Cars passed on the road. A woman laughed near the laundromat. A man loaded gallon jugs of water into the trunk of his car. The world had not altered itself to fit what had just been said. Only mine had. Claire looked at me the way adults look at each other after hard news from a doctor, a banker, or a sheriff. Not daughter to father. Witness to witness. You believe me now, she said. It was not a question. I nodded once. She shut her eyes. When she opened them, they were wet. I didn't want to be right. I know. No. Her voice shook for the first time that day. I really didn't. I wanted you to tell me I was angry and paranoid and grieving and wrong. I folded the papers once and tucked them into my jacket. You should have come to me sooner, I said. And the second the sentence left my mouth, I knew it was the wrong one. Claire gave a short, broken laugh. I tried, Dad. The shame of that was almost physical. She stepped closer, lowering her voice, even though no one stood near enough to hear us. There's more in the house. My head came up. What do you mean, Mom's desk? The recipe box? I think she left something or moved things on purpose. I didn't want to touch too much without you. Why didn't you say that before? Because I wasn't sure. And because every time I got close to checking Dana, somehow appeared. The wind moved her hair across her face. She tucked it back with a hand that still trembled slightly. I can't go back there with you today, she said. If I do, and Dinah sees us together right after this, she'll know. That was when I understood how much strategy had already entered my daughter's life. How long she had been arranging her own behavior around someone else's possible notice. What do you want me to do? Go home. Look like yourself. Don't do anything sudden. Check Mom's recipe box first. She always hid practical things in sentimental places because nobody respected sentimental places enough to search them properly. That was such an Eleanor thing to do that, for one wild second, I almost smiled. Claire saw it, and something in her face softened. She used to say that, remember, Claire said, the safest place for an important paper is somewhere a man won't look unless a woman sends him there. I did remember. Not the exact words, maybe, but the spirit of them. Eleanor tucking house warranties into Christmas card tins. Mortgage papers behind cookbooks because no thief with any sense would willingly sort through bran muffin recipes. Tax records inside old knitting magazines because she said men feared yarn on principle. I looked at Claire and saw with a force that hurt how much of her mother she had become while I was busy grieving the wife I had lost. I'm sorry, I said. For what? For how long you've been standing in this alone? Her mouth tightened. For a second I thought she might cry. Instead, she nodded once stiffly, like somebody accepting an overdue payment that did not begin to cover the debt. When I got home, the house felt different before I even opened the door. Not visibly different, spiritually rearranged. The porch rail still needed paint on the north side. The hydrangea by the walk still drooped because I always forgot how close its roots sat to the foundation. But I no longer approached the house as a man returning to his own shelter. I approached it as a man entering a place where ordinary things had learned to lie. Inside the kitchen smelled faintly of lemon cleaner. Dana had been there. I knew that because I had not cleaned that morning and because she preferred a brand Eleanor never used. Eleanor liked things to smell like soap food or nothing at all. Dana liked the kind of clean that announced itself. The clipboard was gone from the side of the refrigerator. I stood still. Then I crossed the room, checked the counter, the microwave, the mail slot by the pantry. Gone. My pulse kicked once hard. Maybe she had taken it because the list was finished. Maybe she had moved it 3 days earlier, and I had only noticed it yesterday because fear sharpens the wrong senses. Maybe. I did not chase maybe through drawers. I went upstairs. Eleanor's office sat at the end of the hall, opposite our bedroom. I still thought of it as hers, even though every mortgage payment that room ever knew had come out of my account. She had made it hers the way women do not by claim, but by accumulation. Desk lamp chosen for the angle of the shade, needlepoint cushion on the chair, recipe box on the shelf below the file cabinet, because she liked copying recipes by hand while paying the electric bill. I had not spent more than 10 minutes at a time in that room since she died. The door opened on the smell of paper cedar and the faint, dry sweetness of the sachets she tucked into drawers. Dust had settled on the windowsill. Her reading glasses still rested on the blotter beside a pen with dried blue ink in the cap. For a moment, I could not move. Then I saw again what Dr. Morales had shown me on her screen. Dates, notes, signatures, a history. And grief stopped being a wall and became, for the first time in months, a door. I crossed to the shelf and took down the wooden recipe box. It was heavier than it looked. Eleanor liked solid things, things that did not tip easily. Inside were cards in her hand. Blue ink category tabs she cut herself with pinking shears because she said square edges were too severe for dessert. Tea cakes, corn pudding, Sunday roast, lemon icebox pie. I ran my thumb along the cards, slowly looking for what I did not know how to name. Most were ordinary. Ingredients. oven temperatures, small underlines where she wanted to remind herself not to overbake. Then, tucked between sweet tea and summer salad, I found a card with no recipe on it at all, only one line in Eleanor's hand. Move pharmacy slips to desk file. Don't leave in kitchen. No date, no explanation. My mouth went dry. Behind that card was another half covered by an old magazine clipping for peach cobbler. Check signatures. I sat down in her chair so suddenly the wheels creaked under me. Those were not grief notes. Those were instructions. I looked at the desk the way a man looks at a field after realizing the land has been marked for something other than farming. The top drawer held stationery stamps, spare eyeglasses, cloths. The second held church bulletins, a check register, birthday card she meant to send and sometimes forgot. The file drawer below was locked. I almost laughed then, because of course it was. Eleanor locked away practical truth and left emotional breadcrumbs to lead a person back to it. I checked the pen cup, the ceramic dish by the window, the underside of the desk. No key. Then I remembered the sewing basket in the hall closet. Eleanor hid important spare keys in places so domestic, no visiting male relative would think to search them. I crossed the hall, moved the basket, and found the key taped beneath the shelf in an old prescription envelope with her handwriting across the front office. When the file drawer opened, the house made a sound, somewhere in the pipes, like an old man clearing his throat. Inside were folders, arranged in perfect order. Home, taxes, insurance, medical, kids, and one plain manila folder with no label at all. I reached for it and stopped when I heard the front door open downstairs. The sound hit the base of my spine. Tom Dana called. I stood in Eleanor's office with my hand on that unlabeled folder and did not answer quickly enough. "Tom," she called again, closer now. "Are you home?" I slid the folder back exactly where it had been closed. The drawer dropped the key into my pocket and stepped into the hall just as she reached the bottom of the stairs. She looked up, smiling, one hand on the banister purse over her shoulder. "There you are. What are you doing here?" She lifted a paper pharmacy bag. "I was dropping off the antacids you like. Ryan said your stomach was bothering you last night." My eyes went to the bag before I could stop them. She followed the glance and smiled more softly, as if indulging a child. "Just antacids." I came down 2 steps no farther. "You don't need to bring things over for me." "Oh, don't be silly." There was a beat there. Small, but long enough that both of us felt what we were not saying. Her gaze slid past me toward the hall. "Were you in Eleanor's office?" I kept my face blank. "Why?" "No reason." She shifted the bag in her hand. "You just usually don't go in there much?" "Usually." I hated that she knew that. I was looking for stamps. "You could have called me. I keep extras in the kitchen drawer." The sentence slid under my skin like a splinter, not because it was rude, because it presumed an arrangement I had never consciously agreed to, that she knew where things lived in my house better than I did. "That won't be necessary," I said. Her smile thinned so slightly, another man might have missed it. "Of course." She set the pharmacy bag on the hall table. "By the way, I made you a doctor's appointment for next Thursday. Just a routine check-in. Since you've been so tired lately." The staircase seemed to drop away beneath me. "You did what?" "It's nothing serious." She laughed lightly. "Honestly, Tom, you'd think I booked surgery. I did not ask you to make me an appointment." "I know. But somebody has to stay on top of these things. Somebody. Not wife, not daughter, not son. Somebody." As if my life had become a file left unattended too long. "Cancel it," I said. Her eyes sharpened. "Why would I do that?" "Because I told you to." For 1 second we looked at each other without the usual padding language that had cushioned so many smaller wrongs. There was no open hostility in her face. That would almost have been easier. There was only calculation correcting itself. Then she smiled again. "If you feel strongly about it." "I do." "Fine." She lifted both hands slightly. "No need to get upset." There it was again. Upset. The first plank laid carefully in a bridge toward unstable. She touched the pharmacy bag with one finger. "Take those after dinner. They'll help." Then she turned and left as quietly as she had come. I stood in the hall listening to her car start. Only when it pulled out of the driveway did I realize I had been holding my breath. Back in Eleanor's office, I opened the unlabeled folder. Inside were pharmacy printouts, folded once and banded with an old rubber band. Not many. 6 or 7. Notes clipped to them in Eleanor's hand. Not accusations. Observations. Dates. Initials. One line underlined twice. Dana insists on picking up meds when not asked. Another Ryan signs without reading when rushed. And another lower on the page, almost too faint to read, Tom explains things away when tired. I sat back hard in the chair. That one hurt worst, because it was not only true, it was lovingly true. The kind of truth a woman writes only when she is trying to protect a man from the very weakness she knows he will call decency. At the bottom of the folder lay one sealed envelope with my name on it. Not Tom. Thomas. She only used Thomas when she was either teasing me or bracing herself. My fingers shook when I broke the seal. Inside was a single sheet of stationery in Eleanor's hand. Thomas. If you are reading this because I am gone and you have finally opened the right drawer, then I need you to do one thing I know will come harder to you than grief. I need you to distrust comfort when comfort arrives wearing efficiency. I do not know enough yet to accuse anyone of anything, and I pray I am only being over-careful. But I have learned in this life that a person can make themselves necessary in a family long before they make themselves good for it. Watch the papers, watch the medicines, watch who answers for you when you have not spoken. And please, for once in your honorable life, do not wait for the thing to become undeniable before you protect yourself. Love. Eleanor. I do not know how long I sat there with that page in my hand. Long enough for the room to change around me, long enough for the office of a dead wife to become in one terrible, merciful instant the only room in the house where I no longer felt lied to. It was not the medicine that turned my hands cold. It was the fact that Eleanor had seen enough to leave instructions. And it was the knowledge that somewhere beneath the concern, the appointments, and the careful correction, Dana had not merely been helping me live. She had been preparing for the day I would no longer have the right to speak for my own life. I folded Eleanor's letter once then, once again, and slid it back into the envelope with a care that felt too close to fear. The room around me had not moved. Her glasses were still on the blotter. The lamp still cast its yellow circle over the desk. Dust still lay soft in the corners of the window frame, but the whole house had shifted anyway. It was no longer only a place where grief had settled. It was a place where grief had been studied. And as I sat there with Eleanor's letter in one hand and Dana's lie all around me, I understood something that did not let me go. Whoever had been working on my body had also been building a story, and stories like that are not built for one bad dinner. They are built for an ending. Stories like that are not built for one bad dinner. They are built for an ending. I did not sleep much that night. I sat in the garage workshop with Eleanor's letter open under the lamp and Dana's outline of my future beginning to take shape inside my head, whether I wanted it there or not. A man does not spend 2 years telling himself he is preserving his family and then calmly absorb the knowledge that while he was doing it, someone was quietly preparing to move him out of his own authority. It was not only the threat to my body that kept me awake. It was the humiliation of understanding how neatly I had been placed inside the threat. My weakness had not been illness. It had been decency without vigilance. It had been grief mistaken for harmlessness. It had been a lifelong habit of giving people the softer explanation if the harder one would disturb the table. I sat there until after midnight with the papers spread across the bench and the old shop clock ticking louder than it had any right to. The refill records, the receipt, Eleanor's notes, her letter, Dana's antacid bag still sitting untouched on the hall table where she had left it, as if the house itself had refused to let me pretend not to understand the joke. At 12:30, my phone buzzed, a text from Ryan. "Can I come by?" I looked at it for a long time before answering. Then I typed, "Now. Come through the garage." He arrived 20 minutes later, wearing yesterday's shirt under a rumpled jacket, hair damp from either rain or a shower taken too fast to count. He came in without speaking, saw the workbench laid out under the light, and shut the door behind him with more care than I had ever seen him use in his life. For a moment he stood there looking at the papers as though they might still reorganize themselves into something survivable. Then he said, "I found the folder." I did not answer. He took a manila envelope from under his arm and laid it on the bench. There was a softness in his movements I had not seen since he was a boy sick with fever and trying not to let me know he was frightened. "I waited until she was asleep," he said. "Desk drawer in the den. Locked. I used the spare key from the filing cabinet." "You knew where she kept the key?" He flinched. "Yes." That one word carried enough shame to warm a room. I opened the envelope. There were more papers than I expected and less than I feared. Draft power of attorney forms, a physician evaluation of capacity intake packet with several lines already filled in. Notes from a preliminary elder law consultation. A typed summary sheet, neat and bloodless, as a death notice listing me as a widowed male age 68, exhibiting increased forgetfulness, inconsistent medication management, periodic fatigue, and observable episodes of disorientation reported by family. Reported by family. I stared at the phrase until my vision narrowed around it. Ryan stood across from me with both hands braced against the edge of the workbench. I never saw that page before. "No," I said. "You only helped make it possible." He shut his eyes once hard. I turned another page. There, clipped to the back of the intake packet, was a note in Dinah's hand. Ryan cooperative if framed as practical necessity. Claire likely resistant/emotional. Timing best after summer if symptoms continue. Review home ownership implications before fall. I read it once, then again. Home ownership implications. The cruelty of some phrases lies in how dry they are. Nothing dramatic, nothing openly criminal in tone. Just the language of logistics applied to a life, a home, a name, a father. I set the page down so carefully it looked almost reverent. Ryan said very quietly, "I didn't know she wrote it like that." I looked at him. "Did you know she was thinking it?" He did not answer. That answer was enough. We stood in silence with the papers between us, father and son, with the shape of betrayal laid out under a workshop lamp like blueprints for a house neither one of us wanted to admit we had lived in. After a while I said, "Sit down." He obeyed the way grown men only obey their fathers when they know they have forfeited the right to argue. He sat on the old stool by the bench, elbows on his knees, hands locked together. I stayed standing. "You are going to tell me exactly what you knew," I said, "and you are not going to improve yourself while you do it." His face tightened. "I knew she was worried about you," he said. "No, you knew more than that." He swallowed. "I knew she thought you were slipping. And you—" He stared at the floor. "I thought maybe you were. Because—" He rubbed his jaw hard enough to redden it. "Because there were moments, Dad. You forgot things. You got tired fast. You'd say something and then lose the thread. After Memorial Day. Say it." His eyes came up to mine. "After Memorial Day, I got scared. So you let your wife translate my grief into paperwork." His head dropped again. "I didn't know it was that," he said. "But you knew it was something." He nodded. That was the deeper betrayal. Not that Ryan had conspired with Dana in the cold, deliberate way she had worked at this. It was that he had brought the perfect weakness to her design. He had been busy, practical, conflict-averse, eager to believe the person managing details must by virtue of management itself be right. He had not needed to be cruel. He had only needed to be absent at the exact points where courage was required. I thought I was being responsible, he said. No, I said. You were being comfortable. That landed. I saw it in his shoulders. He sat there with the workshop light hitting one side of his face and turning the gray at his temples silver. My son, 40 years old, bigger than me now through the chest, broader in the back. Still in that moment, not big enough to carry the weight of what he had permitted. He looked up after a while. What do we do? I looked at the bench. The answer came before I could soften it. We prove it. He let out a slow breath. What if she already suspects? She does. That made him still. I thought of Dana in the hall looking up at me from the stairs, one hand on the banister asking if I had been in Eleanor's office. Thought of the clipboard gone from the kitchen. The doctor's appointment made without my consent. The way she had said somebody has to stay on top of these things, as if my life had become a task list in need of correction. She knows the room is changing, I said. She just doesn't know how much. Ryan looked at the pages again. Then she might move faster. Yes. That was the first moment the danger became something more than retrospective in my own mind. Up until then, I had been thinking like a man who had discovered a hidden process after months of being worked on by it. In that garage, with the legal packet open and my son pale across from me, I understood the next step. If Dana sensed control slipping, she would not retreat into shame. She would accelerate. I looked toward the kitchen door without seeing it. Call Claire. He blinked. Now? Yes. He did not ask why. He called. She answered on the first ring. Ryan looked at me and I said, Speaker. He obeyed. Claire's voice came into the workshop, thin and tense through the phone. What happened? I got the papers, Ryan said. A beat, then coldly. And he closed his eyes for 1 second. And you were right. Silence. Long enough that I could hear Ryan's breathing change. Finally, Claire said, That doesn't fix anything. No, I said, stepping closer to the bench. But it starts with the truth. Her tone shifted immediately. Not softer, more focused. What did he bring? Ryan began listing them. Draft power of attorney, capacity assessment intake. Dana's note, the line about home ownership implications. He had barely finished when Claire said, I'm coming over. No, I said, not yet. Dad, listen to me. If she's watching either of us, I don't want her seeing all 3 corners close at once. There was a breath on the line that might have been frustration or fear. You think she's checking? I think she's too careful not to. Claire went quiet. Then she said, All right. But you need to search the kitchen again. The pantry too, with the papers in hand this time. Stop looking for one big thing. Look for the way the room works. That was Eleanor in her. Not the words, the instinct. I looked around the workshop, the workbench, the pegboard, the disciplined little systems I had trusted my whole life because they belonged to labor, not manipulation. Come in the morning, I said, early. I'll be there. When the call ended, Ryan said, You really think there's more? I looked down at Dana's neat, practical handwriting and at the line about timing best, after summer, at home, ownership implications, and then at my own son's initials on a preliminary consult packet for my incapacity. Yes, I said, because this is too organized to end with paper alone. We searched the kitchen at 8 the next morning. Claire arrived first before Ryan came back with coffee and a box of copier paper from the office, because, as he put it, I don't know, I thought we might need to make copies, and that was such a painfully masculine attempt at usefulness that I almost forgave him for a second. Almost. The three of us stood in the kitchen with the light still weak and grey through the windows, and I realized the room already felt different because I was no longer seeing it through grief. I was seeing it through intent. The wire supplement basket beside the bread box, the relabeled spice jars, the exact placement of the sugar bowl in relation to the pitcher side of the counter, a long-handled spoon missing from the serving drawer, a canister of lemon drink mix that only Dana ever touched. Clipboards, notes, small systems of correction disguised as household order. Claire opened the pantry with the same slow care a locksmith uses on a stranger's front door. Ryan checked the kitchen drawer where we had found the receipt. I stood at the counter and looked, not glanced. Looked. At the tea bags, at the supplements, at the little, overmanaged neatness of everything. Eleanor's kitchen had not been messy. She liked order, but hers had been a lived-in order softened by instinct. Dana's order was sharper, more controlling. It did not invite use. It anticipated behavior. Ryan pulled out a pharmacy information sheet from under a stack of takeout menus. Got something. I took it from him. Memory screening as a covered benefit. Caregiver resources for adults showing early cognitive decline. Nothing signed, nothing scheduled. But the message in the room had changed. We were no longer asking whether Dana had been worried about my health. We were asking how many separate tracks she had built toward my erasure. Claire was standing on a chair now, checking the top pantry shelf. She found a dark glass bottle tucked behind a bag of flour. What is it? I asked. She handed it down. Adaptogen blend, herbal calming support. Pharmacy label from across town. Ryan frowned. We never use that pharmacy. No, I said. We don't. The bottle itself proved little. But clue by clue, object by object, the room had stopped behaving like a kitchen and begun behaving like testimony. Claire opened the refrigerator next. She stood still for a second, then bent lower and reached behind the cottage cheese and the jar of pickles. When she turned back, she was holding a small travel pill organizer. I saw one like this in her purse, she said quietly. She opened it. Inside were pale tablets cut in half. We all stared at it. For one awful second, the kitchen seemed to lose all depth. The counters flattened. The light sharpened. Every ordinary object around us, a dish towel, a sugar bowl, a lemon wedge on a plate, seemed to take one step backward and let the thing in Claire's hand come forward. Ryan said, "What are those?" Claire looked at me. Something portable. That was when I understood fully what she had been trying to protect me from with that note under the table. Not one bad glass of tea. A system. Portable. Adaptable. Quiet. Intimate. A system that could move with me through my own house. I took the organizer from her and held it in my palm. It was so small. That was part of the obscenity. Something that could fit in a purse in a pocket in the hand of a smiling woman standing at your family table, asking if you wanted more lemon. We photographed it from every angle. Then Claire wrapped it in a clean zip bag from the junk drawer. Ryan said if she left that here, she must have hidden more. I looked at him. Then we keep looking. The mudroom gave itself up just before noon. That room had always been beneath notice. A narrow passage between the garage and the kitchen where umbrellas, boots, reusable grocery bags, and weathered spray bottles collected in slow domestic drift. Not a room anyone sentimentalized, which made it perfect. Claire was kneeling in front of the lower cabinet, looking for extra trash liners when she went still. Dad. There was something in her voice that made both Ryan and me move at the same time. At the back of the cabinet, shoved behind folded paper bags and a half-empty bucket of rock salt, was a black trash bag tied off too neatly. I crouched and dragged it out. It was heavier than it should have been. The knot came loose under my fingers. Inside were flattened supplement packets, empty prescription bottles with labels peeled halfway off pharmacy slips torn into strips, and one long-handled iced teaspoon wrapped in a dish towel. Claire made a sound low in her throat. That's it. I unwrapped the spoon. There was a faint, chalky residue where the handle met the bowl, not enough to see clearly, unless you were already looking for guilt in silver. My scalp prickled. Beneath the spoon lay 2 duplicate bottles of medication. Same pharmacy, same doctor's office. Different fill dates, one in my name, one with the label partly torn away, and there folded in quarters at the bottom was a page from Donna's planner. I opened it. Sunday routine picture first / his glass last. I stared at that line until the words stopped being English. His glass last. Not memory, not concern, not care. Method. Ryan said nothing. He looked as if someone had reached inside his chest and turned a key. Claire backed into the wall and put a hand over her mouth. I stood up with the planner page in one hand and the spoon in the other, and in that moment the whole house changed under me. Not metaphorically, psychologically. That is what people mean when they say a home becomes a crime scene. The furniture does not move. The walls do not darken. The floorboards do not groan on command. What changes is trust. You stop seeing a kitchen. You see a delivery system. You stop seeing a medicine cabinet. You see access. You stop seeing a pantry shelf. You see concealment. You stop seeing a mudroom cabinet. You see disposal. You stop seeing Sunday dinner. You see staging. I took everything to the garage workshop and laid it out on the bench. The planner page, the spoon, the duplicate bottles, the torn packets, the travel organizer, Dana's legal file, Dr. Morales' refill history, Eleanor's notes and letter. It was all there, now enough pieces to make the full machine visible. Ryan stood opposite me and said, "What do we do with this?" I looked up slowly. "We finish building the case." He nodded, but uncertainly. "How?" "By making sure there isn't one place for her to crawl out." Claire stepped closer to the bench and set both hands flat against the scarred wood. "Marjorie." I looked at her. She saw things Claire said. Mom told her to notice. That was right. I could hear the voicemail in my head again. "If you ever see Donna dropping off pharmacy bags or taking kitchen trash out after dark, would you just remember it?" "Call her," I said. Claire did. Marjorie came over 40 minutes later with her canvas tote and her reading glasses tucked into the side pocket. She looked not neighborly, but purposeful. When she saw the evidence on the workbench, she did not ask for explanation first. She looked at the planner page, then the spoon, then Eleanor's letter in its opened envelope. Her mouth tightened. "I should have come sooner," she said. "You're here now. That doesn't make sooner less true. Age gives some people the courage to stop wasting language." Marjorie had reached that stage years ago. She set the tote down and took out the old phone with Eleanor's voicemail already loaded. "There's more," she said. I looked at her. I saw Dana twice with pharmacy bags after Eleanor left me that message. Once through the side yard, once late after 10. I told myself it meant nothing. Then last winter I saw her at your outdoor bin peeling labels off bottles before dropping them in. I nearly came over. I didn't. Claire shut her eyes. Marjorie looked at me with an old woman's plain, merciless honesty. "Your wife was not a fanciful woman, Tom." "No," I said. "She was uneasy before she died. I can hear that now listening back. Not dramatic, not suspicious of shadows. Specific." She played the voicemail again. Eleanor's voice filled the workshop smaller through the phone speaker than it had been in life, and more powerful for it. When it ended, the room seemed to contract around the silence. Ryan cleared his throat. "Will you say that to a deputy?" Marjorie looked at him over her glasses. "Yes. Will you say everything? I am 72 years old," she said. "I no longer save other people from the discomfort of the truth." That was when I knew we had crossed the point of private survival. This was no longer something to be settled with a closed-door family conversation and 3 carefully selected promises. The lie had been too structured, the damage too deliberate, the paper trail too forward-looking. If I tried to solve it softly now, I would not be protecting family. I would be protecting the system that had already tried to erase me from it. By late afternoon, the workshop had become our evidence room. Ryan cross-checked dates on the legal forms against the refill history and found that Dana had scheduled the elder law consult for the week after next. Claire matched that timing to 2 recent Sundays when I had been especially groggy after dinner. Marjorie sat in the folding chair by the pegboard, reading through Dana's notes with the kind of slow fury only very decent people manage. I made copies, labeled envelopes, set aside originals. The work was steadying in a way nothing emotional could have been. This was the father shift I had not seen coming. Not grief becoming rage. Grief becoming discipline. At one point, Ryan said, "If we call law enforcement too early, she'll say we're turning family stress into a story." "She's going to say that anyway," Claire replied. He looked at me. "What do you think?" I looked down at Dana's note clipped to the consult packet. Ryan cooperative if framed as practical necessity. Claire likely resistant/emotional. Then at Eleanor's letter. "Watch who answers for you when you have not spoken." Then at the planner page. His glass last. I understood with a clarity so cold it almost felt like relief what had to happen. "She used the table," I said. Ryan frowned. "She used my table." I repeated, lifting my eyes to his to make me smaller in my own house. "She used Sunday dinner to work on me in front of both of you. She used the shape of family to make me look like I was fading inside it." Claire's breathing changed. She already knew where I was going. Ryan did too a second later. "You want her back here," he said. "I want her in the one room she believed she controlled." Marjorie nodded before either of my children did. "That's right." Ryan looked uneasy. "If we do that, we have to do it clean. No shouting, no guessing." "No," I said. "No guessing." Claire came around the bench until she was standing beside me. "We need sequence." I looked at her. "Yes." She pointed with one finger to the evidence in order. "Note under the table," she said. "Wrong glass, wrong smell. Refill receipt. Dr. Morales. Mom's notes, legal packet, the trash bag, the planner page. And if she tries to say it's all misunderstanding, we bring in Marjorie and the voicemail." Ryan listened with the fixed, grim attention of a man hearing someone else do the moral work he should have done months ago. Then he said, "And if she tries to make him sound confused," I looked at him. He took it and kept going. "If she does that, I say what I signed. I say she brought me papers. I say I let her frame it as precaution because I didn't want a fight. I say I was wrong." Claire turned her head toward him slowly. It was not forgiveness, but it was the first thing he had said all day that sounded like a son instead of an excuse. "That matters," I said. He nodded once. Marjorie got to her feet and picked up her tote. "Then stop talking like this is hypothetical." "It isn't. The woman used this house as a machine. So you stop her with evidence, not emotion, and you do not let her redirect the room." When she left, she put one hand briefly on my arm. "Tom, she said your wife knew your weakness. She loved you anyway. Don't make a religion out of it now." Then she was gone. By evening, the plan had become real enough to frighten me. That was good. A man should be frightened before he tries to end something that has lived this long inside his own walls. Claire stayed. Ryan went to his apartment to shower and come back with a clean shirt tomorrow. The deputy I spoke to on the phone was careful, measured, unwilling to promise anything dramatic, but willing to attend if I requested his presence during what I described as a structured confrontation involving possible medication, manipulation, fraudulent incapacity, planning, and documentary evidence. He asked for copies. I gave him enough to make it impossible to dismiss me as an old man with family problems and not enough to lose control of my own sequence before the room was ready. After I hung up, I stood alone in the kitchen. The house was quiet in a way that no longer felt frightened. It felt alert. Dana's planner was gone from the counter. The supplement basket still sat beside the bread box. The sugar bowl remained slightly too near the pitcher side of the counter. The hall light cast a clean yellow line across the floorboards. The tea glasses gleamed upside down in the rack. I looked at those glasses a long time. Then Claire came in and stood beside me. "You all right?" she asked. "No," I said. That made her almost smile. "Good," she said. "Neither am I." We stood there shoulder to shoulder in the kitchen, not touching both, looking at the room that had held so much ordinary life and so much hidden intent at once. After a while, she said, "I keep thinking about the note." I looked at her. I knew if I said one word out loud that night, she'd hear it in my voice. Claire kept her eyes on the counter, so I wrote it instead. And even then I thought maybe I was already too late. I swallowed. "You weren't?" She shook her head faintly. "No. But I got close enough to understand what too late feels like." That sentence sat between us for a long time. Then I said the thing I should have said weeks earlier, maybe months earlier, maybe the day she first asked me whether I still filled my own organizer. I should have listened to you before I needed proof. Claire finally looked at me. Her eyes were wet, but her voice stayed steady. Yes, no comfort in it, no rush to soften me. And because she did not soften it, it became something better than comfort. Truth. That night I went into the dining room alone and sat at the head of the table in the dark. No plate, no glass, no pitcher, just the room. I let myself look at it as it had been the night of the note. Dana at my right through Ryan's place. Claire on my left. The late light through the west window. The tea in the center. My own chair at the head occupied by a man still calling himself host, while someone else quietly worked at reducing him. I rested both hands flat on the wood and let the anger come. Not loud anger, not shouting anger. The kind that clarifies. The kind that strips away the last excuse. The kind that tells a grieving man there is a difference between preserving a table and protecting the truth that belongs at it. When I stood, I already knew what the next day was going to be. Not a confrontation, not exactly. Something firmer than that. A reclamation. The next morning I called Dana myself. I kept my voice flat and ordinary. That was the hardest part. Not because I wanted to shout. By then, shouting would have been too small for what she had done. It was hard because for 2 years I had used ordinary tones to keep from asking harder questions, and now I had to use that same tone to bring her back into the room where the questions would end her. "Sunday dinner," I said when she answered. "Come by at 6. There was the briefest pause. Not enough for most people to hear. "Enough for me. I wasn't sure you'd feel up to hosting," she said. "I do. That's good." Her voice warmed by half a degree. "Should I bring anything?" "No." Another pause. "All right." I let the silence sit there just long enough to make her feel it. "Ryan will come with me," she said. I expected he would. Then I hung up. The house stayed quiet after that, in a way that no longer felt restful. It felt gathered. Waiting, but not with the old frightened tension. More like a courtroom before a judge comes in. Every room seemed to understand its assignment. The kitchen was no longer where Dana moved things. It was where I stood long enough to put them back under my own hands. The pantry shelves were no longer household order. They were a timeline. The mudroom cabinet had become the place where concealment finally got tired and showed itself. Eleanor's office no longer felt haunted. It felt watchful. Claire came over before noon. Ryan arrived an hour after that, pale and underslept, carrying a box of copied documents from Dana's file that he had hidden under old tax records in his truck. None of us pretended this was just another family problem to be managed, if everyone stayed calm enough. Calm had already been used against us too well. What mattered now was sequence. We spent the morning in the garage workshop, arranging the proof in the only order that made sense. First, the drugging pattern, Dr. Morales's refill history, the early pickups, Dana's signatures, the notes describing me as forgetful, tired, confused. Then the physical evidence. The duplicate bottles, the travel organizer, the long-handled spoon wrapped in the dish towel, The planner page with his glass last in Dana's hand. Then the strategic evidence, the memory screening materials, the temporary care packet Ryan had initialed, the draft power of attorney forms, the consult note, the line about home ownership implications, and under all of it, not because it mattered least, but because it mattered most deeply, Eleanor's notes and letter. Not accusation, not melodrama. The truth is only my wife knew how to write it, restrained practical, more devastating because it never strained to be. Ryan stood over the bench, reading and rereading pages he had already seen, as if repetition might somehow make them belong to a less shameful version of his life. Claire leaned against the stool with her arms folded tight, saying almost nothing unless it mattered. That silence of hers had changed. It was no longer the silence of a daughter afraid she would not be believed. It was the silence of a witness who knew she would be and no longer felt any obligation to soften the cost. At one point, Ryan said, "Maybe we should have somebody else here from the start." I looked at him. Who? A lawyer, a deputy. Somebody. "And what do we say?" I asked. "My daughter-in-law has been quietly drugging me, documenting me as confused and preparing to take my house, but I prefer it if you arrived before she hears the first word of it." He rubbed his face. "When you say it like that, that is the way it is." Claire did not look at him. "He means he's afraid." "I know what he means," I said. Ryan dropped his hand and met my eyes for the first time that day without flinching. "Yeah," he said. "I'm afraid." It is a strange relief when a man finally speaks the truth plain enough to stand on it. "So am I said. That seemed to steady him more than anything else had. We did not plan theatrics. We planned sequence. Dana's only weapons left were composure, performance, concern, and the old suggestion that emotion itself discredited truth. If we rushed, she could slip into that performance and keep half the room arranged around her simply because she sounded the least upset. If we moved piece by piece, she would have to change stories too quickly for any of them to hold. Dr. Morales agreed to stay reachable by phone during dinner in case we needed immediate confirmation of the refill history. Marjorie said in the plainest voice imaginable, "If you need me in that room, I'll be in that room." Eleanor asked me once to notice. I'm old enough now not to keep failing good women out of politeness. She came by after 3 to leave her phone with Claire so the voicemail would be ready and to tell me one more time, "Don't get kind in the middle of the truth." The afternoon passed in a careful, unnatural rhythm. I shaved, ironed a clean shirt, set the dining room table myself, took out Eleanor's good placemats and folded the napkins the way she taught me. For one ugly second around 4:30, standing there with the silverware in my hands, I thought the table itself might reject me for what I was about to use it for. Then I remembered the note under the cloth. The wrong glass. Claire's face. Dana's voice telling me it was just tea. No, the table had already been used for worse. I brewed fresh tea at 5:30. I did it slowly, measuring each step the way Eleanor had. Black tea bags steeped just enough not too long, sugar while it was still hot, lemon slices waiting in the refrigerator. I used the old glass pitcher because that mattered. I wanted the room to hold both truths at once, what the ritual had been and what it had been turned into. I poured the tea into the pitcher myself and never let it out of my sight. That more than anything else calmed me. By 5:45, the house smelled like roast chicken, buttered tea, and the faint, clean scent of floor wax from the dining room. The same house, the same meal, the same Sunday shape. But beneath all of it was something firmer than fear now. Intent, yes, also respect. Not for Dinah, for the room, for Eleanor, for the fact that truth deserved better than a shouting match in a hallway. Claire arrived first and came in through the front door as if this were any other Sunday. She wore dark green, almost no jewelry, her mother's wedding band still on the chain at her throat. We did not hug. We looked at each other once, and that was enough. Ryan came 10 minutes later, Dana with him. She had dressed carefully, not lavishly, just exact, Neutral blouse, navy slacks, small gold hoops, hair pinned back in that efficient style she used when she wanted to look practical rather than decorative. There was a peach cobbler in her hands. "I know you said not to bring anything," she said with a soft smile, "but old habits." I took the dish from her. "You should have listened." She looked at me, then properly looked, and I saw the first hairline crack. Not fear, alertness, the sense of someone stepping onto familiar ground and feeling one bored answer differently underfoot. Ryan closed the door behind them. The dining room seemed smaller once everyone was seated. Same arrangement as the first night. I had chosen that on purpose. Me at the head, Ryan to my right, Dana beside him, Claire to my left, the pitcher in the center, the light lowering through the west window, evening moving toward us the way it always had. I said grace. My voice did not shake. When I finished, Dana reached automatically for the pitcher. "No," I said. My hand went to it before hers touched the handle. A small silence passed over the table. "I've got it," I said. She smiled. "Of course." I poured Claire's, then Ryan's, then Dana's. Then I set the pitcher down without filling my own glass. Claire did not move. Ryan looked at the empty place beside my plate, then at me. Dana folded her napkin carefully in half on her lap. "You aren't having any?" "No." "You made it?" "Yes." "Then why wouldn't you drink it?" I looked at her. "Because last time I sat at this table, I said my daughter had to pass me a note under the cloth telling me not to." Ryan stopped breathing. Claire kept her eyes on Dana. The smile did not leave Dana's face right away. That almost impressed me. It only thinned at the edges. "I'm sorry," she said. "No," I said. "You're not." And that was where the point of no return finally arrived. Not in the mudroom cabinet, not in the legal file, not even in Eleanor's letter. It arrived there at the center of my table with the fresh tea between us and the old pattern broken cleanly in half. Because for the first time since my wife died, I was not sitting at that table to preserve the illusion of family. I was sitting there to destroy the lie living inside it. "I'm sorry," she said. "No," I said, "you're not." The room did not move, but something in it changed shape. For years, Dana had lived off the tiny hesitation people gave her between what she said and what they were willing to accuse her of meaning. She had built herself inside that gap. She had moved through my house with the confidence of someone who understood that most decent people would rather doubt themselves than believe the worst about a family member in their own kitchen. That night, there was no gap left. Ryan looked from me to her, and then down at the untouched tea in front of him. Claire did not look anywhere but at Dana. The west window had gone from gold to dim gray, and the glass now reflected the room back at us in faint doubles. 4 people at a table, a pitcher in the middle, 3 filled glasses, 1 empty place setting where mine should have been. If someone had looked in from the yard, they would have seen the same family shape I had spent 2 years protecting. Only now the shape was about to tell the truth. Dana gave a small, bewildered laugh. "Tom, if this is about Claire upsetting you the other night." "Not yet," I said. That silenced her. I took the folded note from my shirt pocket and laid it on the table beside my plate. The paper had been opened and closed so many times the crease had gone soft under my fingers. My daughter slid me that under the table because she believed the iced tea in front of me had been prepared differently from everyone else's. Dana looked from the note to Claire and let hurt rise into her face. She was good. I had to give her that. If I had not already seen the planner page, the notes, the signatures, the bottles, I might almost have admired the composure of it. "That is insane," she said quietly. "No," Claire said. "It was necessary." Dana turned toward Ryan, not to me. "Are we doing this?" Ryan did not answer. That frightened her more than my words had. I picked up the note again, folded it once, and set it back down. At first, I hoped she was wrong. Then I checked my medicine cabinet. I found a refill bottle. I didn't remember opening pills out of order in an organizer. I fill myself and a receipt in my kitchen drawer. Showing a pickup date I knew I had not made. I laid the receipt on the table. That was the beginning. Dana's face arranged itself into patient concern. Tom, we already talked about this. You were tired. I picked that up for you because you forgot. You signed for it. Yes. The concern held. Exactly. I slid Dr. Morales' refill printouts across the table, and then I went to the pharmacist. That did it. Not outwardly at first, but her pupils changed. A small contraction, a brief involuntary understanding that the room had already moved past the story she wanted to tell. Ryan looked at the papers as if he had not seen them before, though he had. Claire did not look down. She looked only at Dana. I went on. Dr. Morales reviewed my refill history. She confirmed that my prescriptions were picked up early, that supplements and sleep aids had been added in ways that could create dizziness and confusion, and that notes were attached to my records, suggesting I was forgetful and unable to manage my own routine. Dana let out a slow breath through her nose and shook her head as if I had disappointed her by misunderstanding something basic. That is a grotesque distortion. No, I said. That is a professional summary. She doesn't know our family. She knows signatures and dates. Dana's voice softened further, and for one dangerous second I understood how many people she had bent around herself by sounding most reasonable when everyone else was too hurt to choose the exact right word. Tom, grieving men your age often go through periods of fatigue and disorganization. We were trying to keep you safe. She looked at Ryan. Your son and I. Ryan kept his eyes on his plate. A thin pulse jumped in Dana's throat. I laid the travel pill organizer on the table. Then one of the duplicate bottles. Then the planner page in its plastic sleeve. What is this? I asked. For the first time, she did not answer quickly. She looked at the planner page, his glass last, her own handwriting. It's a note, she said finally. Yes. That doesn't mean what you're implying? Then tell me what it means. Silence. Ryan lifted his head. Tell him. Dana turned toward him so fast the chair barely moved and yet seemed to scrape the whole room. Excuse me. Tell him what it means. He had never spoken to her that way in front of me, not once in 11 years. It changed the air. Dana's face emptied of soft concern. Not all at once, piece by piece. The warmth first, then the little indulgent smile. Then the patient sorrow she liked to use when somebody else seemed emotionally inconvenient. What was left looked younger somehow, sharper, less human. It means she said each word chosen now with a cold exactness she had not shown us before. That if your father had a habit of switching glasses or pouring his own before everyone sat down, I needed a reminder to keep the room orderly. No, Claire said. Dana's gaze snapped to her. You don't know what you're talking about. Claire reached into her bag and took out the spiral notebook. She did not flourish it. She opened it to a marked page and set it beside the planner note. I know exactly what I'm talking about, she said. I've been writing it down since March because you kept trying to make my father sound like a problem instead of a person. Dana actually laughed then. Not kindly, not nervously, with contempt. Oh, sweetheart, she said. You wrote notes. Every muscle in my body went still. I had never heard her call Claire sweetheart like that before. Not as an endearment, as a dismissal. Claire heard it too. So did Ryan. I slid another document across the table. The capacity assessment intake. Then the draft power of attorney packet. Then the temporary care consult Ryan had initialed. Dana's eyes moved over them and then back to me. For one last second, she considered, I think, whether there was still some version of concern broad enough to cover all of this. Then she made a choice. All right, she said. The words fell into the room like something breaking. Ryan's head came up. All right, Dana turned toward him slowly. Since apparently we are pretending paperwork is a crime now, you said it was precaution, he said. It was precaution. You wrote that Claire was likely emotional resistance. Because she is. You wrote review homeownership implications before fall. She held his gaze. Because someone in this family had to think ahead. There it was. Not confession exactly. Something worse. Rationale. A villain's mask does not always rip off in a scream. Sometimes it simply stops bothering. I looked at her, and for the first time since all of this began, the fear was gone. In its place was something so calm it almost felt like pity. Not for her. For all the years I had spent believing a man's duty was to preserve the surface after the life beneath it had already changed. You used my weakness, I said. No. Her voice was cool, almost bored now. I managed what everybody else refused to manage. Claire made a sound of disbelief. Dana ignored her. Her eyes stayed on me. Your wife died. Your son checked out into work. Your daughter turned every room into a mood. And you... She paused, and the first open contempt edged fully into her face. You sat at the head of the table every Sunday and called that leadership. Ryan whispered Jesus, but I did not look at him. I looked only at her. Because, there it was. The truth under the language of care. Not concern, contempt, not burden, ambition. You thought grief made me easy, I said. I thought grief made you passive. She said it plainly. No one in the room moved. No one even seemed to breathe. I reached into my pocket and took out Eleanor's letter. This, I said, is what my wife left me. Something flickered in Dana's face then. Real alarm this time. I did not hand it to her. I read it aloud. Slowly, every word. If you are reading this because I am gone and you have finally opened the right drawer, then I need you to do one thing I know will come harder to you than grief. I need you to distrust comfort when comfort arrives wearing efficiency. I do not know enough yet to accuse anyone of anything, and I pray I am only being over-careful. But I have learned in this life that a person can make themselves necessary in a family long before they make themselves good for it. Watch the papers. Watch the medicines. Watch who answers for you when you have not spoken. And please, for once in your honorable life, do not wait for the thing to become undeniable before you protect yourself. Love, Eleanor. By the time I finished, Claire was crying soundlessly. Ryan had both hands over his mouth. Dana was no longer pretending not to understand the direction of the room. She had no proof, Dana said sharply. No, I said. She had better instincts than I did. Then Claire pressed play on Marjorie's phone. Eleanor's old voicemail filled the dining room. Marjorie, it's me. I'm probably being over-careful. If you ever see Dana dropping off pharmacy bags or taking kitchen trash out after dark, would you just remember it? Tom thinks peace is always the safer choice, and Ryan thinks conflict solves itself if you outweight it. Ryan bent forward with his elbows on his knees as if he had been struck. I had thought somewhere inside me that hearing Eleanor's voice in that room might break me. It did not. It held me up. When the voicemail ended, the silence that followed was not empty. It was full of judgment. Dana looked around the table and saw, perhaps for the first time in her adult life, that no one in the room was rearranging themselves to make her more comfortable. This is absurd, she said, but the word had lost its force. A dying woman's suspicions, an emotional daughter's diary. A pharmacist covering herself in a bunch of forms nobody even filed. And the bottles, I asked. She looked at me. The spoon, Claire asked. The signatures, Ryan said hoarsely. Dana stood so abruptly her chair hit the wall behind her. I am done sitting here while the three of you turn family stress into some paranoid fantasy. No, I said. She stopped. It was only one word, but it was my table, my house, my voice, and for the first time in years I used all three together without apology. You are going to sit down, I said, because the deputy is on his way. For the first time since 6 o'clock, she looked genuinely unprepared. Ryan stared at me. Claire did not. Claire had known. We arranged it that way an hour earlier, after I spoke with Deputy Marcus Hale, who had said in the careful language officers use when families are involved that he could not arrest someone on a husband's say-so and a widower's fear, but he could come out, hear a formal statement, and review evidence if asked to attend during a volatile confrontation. Dana's eyes moved from me to Ryan to the hall as if calculating distance now that the script had finally left her hands. "You called the police on me," she said. "I called them into my own house," I said, after gathering evidence that someone inside it had been trying to turn me into paperwork. The doorbell rang. No one moved at first. Then I stood, walked to the front hall, and opened the door. Deputy Marcus Hale was younger than I expected, maybe late 30s, square-faced notebook already in hand. Behind him, visible through the porch glass, stood Marjorie with both hands on her tote, chin lifted like she had decided old age might as well be useful now. Hale stepped in, took in the room with one quick glance, and said, "Mr. Whitaker." "Yes. You said you had documents and items you wanted formally recorded." "I do." Dana's voice came sharp from the dining room. "This is insane." Hale turned slightly toward her. "Ma'am, I have done nothing but take care of this family." His expression did not change. "You'll have a chance to speak." That finally was the wrong line for her. Not because it accused, because it equalized. It took away the special status of her concern and made it one statement among others. I led him to the table. What followed was not quick. I did not allow quick. I laid out each piece in order. The note, the receipt, the refill history, the duplicate bottles, the travel organizer, the spoon, the planner page, the legal drafts. Ryan confirmed his initials on the consult packet and acknowledged Dana's discussions of future care. Claire handed over her notebook and photo records. Marjorie, once invited in, gave her statement in the kind of plain old voice juries trust and manipulators hate. "I'm not here to speculate," she said. "I'm here to tell you Eleanor Whitaker was not a fanciful woman, that she asked me to notice certain things and that I noticed them too late." Dana tried twice to interrupt and once to cry. The crying lasted less than a minute because no one at the table moved toward it. That seemed to enrage her more than anything else had. When Hale asked directly about the planner note, his glass last, she said it referred to table organization. When he asked about the peeled labels in the trash bag, she said she cleaned compulsively and liked things tidy. When he asked about the duplicate medication bottles and the signed pickups, she said she had been protecting me from myself. And there at last she overreached. "Protecting him from himself?" Hale repeated. Donna drew in breath, saw too late what she had revealed, and tried to back up. "From forgetting, from making errors, from being himself," I said. She snapped toward me. "You were falling apart." "No," I said. "I was grieving." The room held that distinction. That was my moment, not because it was theatrical, because it was clean. "You were falling apart." "No. I was grieving." One sentence for her whole strategy. One sentence for the life she had tried to convert into weakness, and everyone in the room understood the difference. Something in Dana's face broke then. Not into remorse, into naked fury. "You would have lost that house inside 5 years," she said, looking at me as if the others were suddenly furniture. "You'd have let the taxes slide, let repairs pile up, let your daughter drift in and out whenever it suited her, and your son would have cleaned up the paperwork after the fact like always. I was the only person doing what needed to be done." Ryan stood so fast his chair nearly overturned. "Don't talk about him like that." Dana turned on him with all the stored contempt of a woman who had mistaken competence for superiority too long. "Then you should have acted like his son instead of his accountant." Ryan went white. Hale stepped between them before the movement could turn into anything more. "Ma'am," he said, no softness left in his voice. "Now, I need you to stop." She looked around the room, breathing hard, and realized the mask had not slipped. It was gone. Every person in that room had seen what lived beneath the concern. The practical greed, the contempt for grief, the belief that usefulness entitled her to ownership. Claire's tears had dried. She looked at Dana, not with fear now, but with the clean, exhausted disgust of a person finally forced to stop doubting herself. Marjorie stood with both hands on her tote like an old sentinel who had come to witness a house being handed back. Ryan looked as though the architecture of his life had dropped through 3 floors at once. And I sat at the head of my table and did not look away. Hale called in the evidence. Formal report. Supervising officer requested. Possible fraud. Possible unlawful medication manipulation pending review. He said the words in dry professional order, and I loved him for not dramatizing any of them. When he told Dana she needed to leave the property until the matter was sorted, she laughed once in disbelief. "This is my family," she said. "No," I said. The word stopped her in the doorway. This was my family. You tried to turn it into a system. It was the last thing I said to her. She looked at me then with a hatred so plain it almost felt like relief. Nothing hidden anymore. Then Hale escorted her out. The front door closed. The house went quiet. Not empty. Quiet. Which is not the same thing. For a long moment, none of us moved. Then Ryan sat back down and put both hands over his face. His shoulders shook once. Not sobbing. Something more contained and maybe worse. The body's last refusal to remain dignified when the soul has finally caught up to itself. Claire looked at me. "Dad." I know I said. Because I did know. Not just about the shock, about the next danger too. The silence after justice. The part where adrenaline leaves and a person is still standing in the same house with the same furniture and the memory of what happened inside it. Marjorie came around the table and put Eleanor's phone gently beside me. "She'd be proud of you," she said. I almost told her not to say that, not because I did not want it, because I wanted it too much. Instead, I said, "Thank you for coming. You thank me later by not turning soft before paperwork finishes its work." Even then, she made me nearly smile. She left a few minutes later. Hale took the evidence he could formally log that night and photographed the rest in place. There would be follow-ups, statements, lab work, lawyers, all the slow machinery of consequence. But the moral reversal had already happened, and everybody in the house knew it. Ryan stayed after. Claire went into the kitchen and without asking began putting food away, not because dinner had succeeded, but because the room needed ordinary hands in it again. That nearly undid me, the simple domestic sound of containers opening and closing after all that truth. Ryan sat at the table looking 10 years older. "I don't know how to ask you to forgive me," he said. I stayed standing a moment longer before I sat across from him. Not at the head this time. Across. Man to man. Father to son. Wronged and failing. "That's because I'm not ready to give it," I said. He nodded once. "Fair. You want honesty, now you get honesty." I kept my voice level. "You were not evil, but you were weak in the exact ways she needed. You wanted peace more than truth. That is how men hand over a house and still tell themselves they meant well." He shut his eyes. "I know. I think you do now." He looked at me then, and whatever else he was in that moment, he was no longer pretending. I thought keeping conflict down was maturity. "It is," I said, "if the thing being kept down is your own pride, not somebody else's harm." He nodded slowly. "I don't know what happens with me and her," he said. "That's your business." "Still my wife?" "Yes." He swallowed. "Still your son?" That hurt. Because it was true. Because truth does not make pain tidy. "Yes," I said. We sat in that for a while. Then Claire came back in, drying her hands on a towel, and Ryan stood. "I'm going to go," he said. She said nothing. At the door, he turned back. "I should have heard you." Claire looked at him the way people look at apologies when they have already paid too much for them. Then she said, "You should have believed what made you uncomfortable sooner." He nodded. "No absolution. Good. Anything softer would have cheapened all of it. When he left the house, grew larger, not emptier, just larger, like walls that had been carrying other people's breath too long and had finally given some of it back. Claire and I cleared the table in near silence. I carried dishes to the kitchen. She rinsed and stacked. Once reaching for the same plate at the same time, our hands touched, and she froze. So did I. I should have listened sooner, I said. She did not answer right away. I know, she said finally. That was kinder somehow than if she had rushed to tell me it was all right. We finished the kitchen, and then without speaking, both found ourselves standing in the doorway of Eleanor's office. The room looked different at night, softer, lamp on, her glasses still on the blotter. The opened file drawer honest now, in a way it had never been while it was hiding from me. Claire went to the shelf and lifted the recipe box. She'd hate to know you finally found the right drawer only because a woman sent you there, she said. I laughed then, real laughter. Tired, rough, but real. Yes, I said. She would. We took the box back to the kitchen. Claire sat at the table while I opened it. The cards were where they had been blue ink and underlined notes. Tea cakes, summer salad, Sunday roast. Then at last, the sweet tea card Eleanor had used for 20 years, stained at 1 sugar ratio. Adjusted once in darker ink after Ryan complained at 12 that church tea tasted like punishment. I set the card on the table between us. Claire touched the edge of it with one finger. She used to say you always poured too fast. She was right. She usually was. We did not talk after that for a while. The next few days passed in the long, sober rhythm of aftermath. Calls, statements, a visit from an attorney who reviewed the documents and said the consult packet Ryan had initialed had no power standing alone, but together with everything else, helped establish intent. Dr. Morales followed up with written confirmation of the refill irregularities and the caregiver notes. Hale came back once for additional photographs and took the spoon for analysis. Dana, through a lawyer, moved from outrage to distance with remarkable speed, as if once the room no longer rewarded performance, she saw no use in lingering in it. Ryan moved into a short-term apartment 2 towns over and began awkwardly and without fanfare to do the work of a son instead of a delegate. He met with the attorney, brought over copies instead of instructions. Did not ask to be told he was trying. Simply tried. That mattered. But the deepest healing did not come from paperwork. It came from use. The first night after the confrontation, I could not sit in the dining room. The chairs looked accusatory. The picture on the counter looked like evidence no matter how clean it was. So Claire and I ate soup in the kitchen, standing up half the time, talking about nothing for 20 minutes, and then about everything for 2 hours. The second night, I carried my plate into the dining room and sat for 10 minutes alone with no food on the table at all. Just the room, the chair, the place where she had tried to erase me, the place where I had refused. By the end of the week, I opened the windows. That was when the house began to come back. Not because fresh air fixes anything, because concealment hates air. Curtains moved. The rooms no longer felt sealed around old performances. Dinah's planner was gone from the counter. The supplement basket was gone from the pantry. The clipboards, the casual notes, the little systems of management that had quietly recentered the house around her all disappeared, and what remained was not my old life exactly. It was better than that. It was honest. On the 9th day, Claire came over in the late afternoon carrying lemons and a small paper bag of fresh mint from the pot on her apartment balcony. For tea, she said. I looked at the lemons, then at her. You sure? She nodded. Only if you pour. So I did. The sunlight was warm in the kitchen. The windows were open. Somewhere outside, a lawnmower droned 2 streets over. Ordinary neighborhood sounds. The kind that once would have made me think nothing of consequence was happening inside my house at all. Now they sounded like witness to peace, restored properly, not merely performed. I brewed the tea slowly. Claire sat at the kitchen table, shelling peas into a bowl the way Eleanor used to when she wanted her hands busy during serious thinking. Every now and then she looked up and watched me. Not nervously anymore. Carefully, as if the act itself mattered. A father reclaiming an ordinary motion. I always thought the pitcher was too heavy for Mom, she said. It was. Then why'd she keep using it? I smiled faintly. She liked things that made a little demand on a person. Claire nodded, as if that explained more than a pitcher. When the tea was ready, I poured it into Eleanor's glass pitcher, added lemon, and carried it to the dining room myself. The room did not resist me. That was the grace of it. After all the fear, all the planning, all the truth that had to be torn through the walls of the place, the room simply accepted honest use. Claire came in behind me with 2 glasses. I set the pitcher in the center of the table and rested Eleanor's tea card beside it. Not as relic, not as shrine, as instruction. Then I pulled out the chair for Claire and took my own seat. For a second, neither of us moved. The table looked different in afternoon light than it had in the long, accusing shadows of Sunday evening. Softer, more itself, the grain of the wood visible under the polish. Small scratches from years of plates and elbows and children doing homework where they were told not to. A family table again. Not a stage. I poured her glass first, then mine. We sat. No note slid under the cloth. No one watched my hands. No one corrected me. No one answered for me before I spoke. Claire lifted her glass and took the first sip. Her eyes closed for a second. When she opened them, they were wet but calm. "Tastes right," she said. I took a sip of my own. It did. Not because Atapa's grief had vanished. Not because justice had made the dead return or the living innocent. It tasted right because I knew what was in it, who had made it, and what room I was in. After a while, Claire said, "Mom would have liked this." I looked at the card beside the picture. Eleanor's blue ink. Her small underline beneath steep no longer than 5 minutes. Her sharp, practical mind still ordering a house she had not lived in for years, except through us. She built more of this place than I understood, I said. Claire smiled sadly. That was kind of her thing. Yes. We sat in the quiet together. Later, when the light shifted gold across the table and the open windows let in the smell of cut grass and warm dust, Claire rested her hand flat on the wood between us, not reaching under it, not hiding anything. Just there, visible and still, I put my hand over hers. No speech, no declaration, nothing dramatic enough to cheapen what the room had cost us. Outside, the neighborhood moved in ordinary ways. A dog barked once. A screen door snapped shut somewhere. Ryan's truck did not come down the driveway. Dana's voice did not enter through any doorway. The house did not ask us to keep one more lie alive inside it. For the first time in a long while, it did not feel like the house was waiting for something from me. It simply let me sit there with my daughter with the tea I had poured myself and tell the truth by staying.